Well, personally, I envision the jails of the year 2000, in my opinion, that they will be smaller, that they will be so constructed that various programs can be put into them. I think that they'll be located more or less on ground levels and have proper facilities for work release programs, vocational training, so that when the prisoner is committed, the hardcore prisoner is committed, he can get some training that will enable him to get back into society and make an honest living. This is the...
Now you say they'll be smaller as you see them. How can you say this when our jail population is increasing every year?
Well, we feel very strongly that under the Bail Bond Reform Act, we think that judges will do more sentencing where a prisoner will probably spend his nights in jail and his weekends in jail and still retain his job out in society, and under parole that he'll be put under probation, that we can handle more people cheaply and as safely as keeping him locked up. In the present day, many people are locked up merely because they don't have money to make bond, where a man with money, of course, gets out immediately.
Well, I sort of suspicioned this was start an argument, and I saw that the motion was dead, and why get into an argument? I didn't ask these people to resign from the poverty board. I didn't get them in the best or end, and so I just decided I'd just keep on my course. And of course, with a mandate at this commissioner's court and a mandate at the county judges, hundreds and hundreds of people. In fact, I spent my nearly entire weekend answering the telephone. People encouraged me not to bow down, not to quit. I think I'd be letting the people down if this court did withdraw.
Well, of course, Phil, this was a highly technical question this morning, and I'm not sure that I can answer it either. I think we need to turn to the law books and lawyers to determine whether or not 2 abstentions of vote on the Commissioner's Court is the same as there being absent members. And if so, then that motion carried this morning. If not, then the motion did not carry, because it takes a majority of the court, which would have been 3 members, for it to pass. True, what you say in view of the legal opinion of the Attorney General of Texas, we would be in violation if we continue into this operation.
No, mine is completely independent and objective, and is to just determine first if there is any type of involvement by her. I have not talked with her yet or of any of the witnesses, and is to then determine if there was some type of involvement, and if there was some involvement, whether or not that involvement violated any of the guidelines and the job description for which she is hired.
Well, Senator, it has many advantages by cutting down on personnel, having better trained personnel, professional type people. It should be realized, however, that there will be a transportation problem, but I think that the cost of this would certainly be outweighed by the salaries saved. We can also, in a jail like this, build it so that programs can be put into effect, such as vocational training and etc., to better teach a prisoner to cope with society when he's out.
There are many counties in the United States adopting a regional system.
There is a trend towards the regional jail. Yes, definitely, I think this will be the thing of the future.
Sometimes in the big city we seem to get so busy we forget there's another world out there. A case in point is the old Combine store. It sits beside narrow Combine Road, just 24 miles from the skyscrapers of downtown Dallas. And behind its paint-peeling walls, indeed, it is a different world. They run it like they might have a half-century ago. In one corner sits an old pot-bellied stove, a cast-iron stove. The old grocer bins are virtually unchanged from Grandpa's day. One still advertises its coffee at 15 cents a pound. Combine itself is an almost century-year-old farming community which has seen its up and downs. But somehow the Combine store seems to have always remained about the same. It's run now by Mr. and Mrs. J.V. Bannister, and it was owned by her grandfather back when folks came in wagons rather than cars. Miss Bannister, I understand the story here has a lot of history behind it, some of it rather colorful history. When did the store originate?
Well, I'm not quite sure. It's been 85 years, I'm sure.
Tell me, many years ago there was a blacksmith shop here and
Grist mill.
A grist mill and
Cotton gin.
Cotton gin.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said a coffin shed. What was that?
Yes, out at the back, there was a little shed they call the coffin shed. And that's where they stored the coffins. They carried harness and, well, anything that anybody would need in those days.
Do the old-timers still gather here on Saturday to shoot the bull?
Well, some of them do. If one comes, if another one passes, he automatically stops for a chat about old days.
Yeah, that's what they talk about.
Uh-huh.
Now there are newfangled canned goods sitting on those ancient shelves, and there's tissue in the old Cracker Barrel. Even Combine Store can't stop all those new merchandising efforts, but they've come about as close as anybody. And the old-timers, the ones out here who gather around that pot-bellied stove in the winter and sit out here on the porch in the summer to tell their tall tales, well, they like it just the way it is. Frankly, so do I. Kerosene, anyone? Tommy Ayers in Combine for Channel 8 News.
You know, that argument is so absurd that it doesn't even merit answering. If people didn't drink as much, I doubt very seriously if the liquor industries would really support this. The evidence is just to the contrary. Every state which has brought in liquor by the drink, consumption per person has radically increased, not decreased.
Dr. Galloway, if you're so much against liquor by the drink, why doesn't your organization go after the private club industry in Texas?
Quite frankly, we think the private club situation is a farce, and probably the legislature ought to deal with it if liquor by the drink is not is defeated. In my opinion, if liquor was not already a commodity that was authorized and legalized in America, and were being brought before the Food and Drug Administration of our nation today, they would not authorize the sale of it because of its detrimental effect upon humanity. Now, we see a lot of things, cyclamates and others, being discarded with far, far less harmful effect upon the human body than alcohol. But realistically, the people of the state probably are just not going to go that way. And so you fight the battles that you can win.
Well, of course, this leaves us in the position, based on the Attorney General's opinion, of being totally in violation of the law should we continue now that we are aware of such opinion. I think that we would be remiss if we moved forward without either a new opinion or an opinion that changes the old one or some such. I personally feel that we're in violation if we move one step further now.
Again, I want to emphasize that the officer in the field is charged with making instant snap judgments, and oftentimes he's faced with the responsibility of making that judgment which hinges on the outcome of whether or not a man lives or dies. He's obligated by law to undertake this responsibility, and I think by and large our officers are fulfilling this responsibility with a great deal of discretion and integrity. And I want everyone in this community to understand that when an officer is in the field doing his duty and he is following the guidelines set forth by state statutes and policies of this department, that I'm going to do everything within my power to keep people from indicting him for doing what the public pays him to do.
Ted, unfortunately, the countdown graph is a little bit disappointing this year. Would you interpret it for us?
Jerry, I'd be glad to. Here we have a graph showing the days before the job fair and the number of pledges for jobs that we've had, and the green indicates last year. So it shows you that we came up here to about 4,000 jobs just before the job fair, and the red line is this year. And as you can see, here we are 6 days before the job fair, and there's one holiday in there, and unfortunately, and we're only up to about 1,700 jobs. Unfortunately, the companies, some of them that made this spurt here at the end for last year, are already in the figures for this year, which is part of our problem.
Why is that? Why is the problem?
Jerry, undoubtedly, the softness in our economy is affecting it, and rightly so. I think we were a little bit unrealistic in saying that we could get 5,000 jobs. We didn't anticipate the degree of the softness. And I'm sure this is the primary reason.
Commissioner Price, you just put a letter on District Attorney Henry Wade's desk. What is in that letter, and what are you asking?
I was asking the district attorney for his legal opinion concerning the meeting yesterday in which 2 members abstained from voting, 2 members voted in the affirmative, and 1 member voting no, whether or not this constitutes a legal action of the Commissioner's Court or not. There is a second question in the letter, and that is, under Texas law, is the situation where those that abstain from voting treated the same as those that would have been absent for a meeting. This would have to do, of course, with the number of a quorum, and this would be beneficial to know.
Now, District Attorney Henry Wade said yesterday that he felt that the action actually pulled out the commissioners from the war on poverty. Do you agree with this?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. Mr. Wade is our attorney, and that's the reason I'm asking him at this point for his opinion. I have not talked to him previous to this, and I feel that he certainly is capable and qualified to have this type for us.
I heard of this last fall, and some things make sense and some don't, and this didn't make sense because Oronase, its only effect, not only Oronase, but these other drugs. Oronase is the one that was being tested, but any of these drugs that I have listed there that are what they call sulfonylureas, they work by enabling the patient to put out his own insulin, and that should be beneficial. If anything, it should keep the blood sugar under control and do him good instead of harm. The worst it would do is no good. You know, the disease had progressed far enough by the time he was put on Oronase that you couldn't reverse things.
I most certainly believe that there has been a concerted effort on the part of some members of this community to bring this incident out of context, and also to bring this incident before the public in an effort to bring about an incident by putting out false information. This information that's here in writing, distributed by SCLC members, is certainly not true. It's false. And I think it's an effort on their part to make something of an incident which they're not aware of what actually happened.
How many witnesses were interviewed, and did all of them contend that the boy was shot while he was lying on the ground?
Most of the witnesses interviewed at first indicated that the officer had shot the suspect while he was lying on the ground. And when they were questioned by the FBI, they changed their stories very quickly and indicated that they did not see the shooting at all. They only heard the shots and the shouting.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that during my 6 years in Austin, I've never been absent on any record vote that's come up before the legislature during my course of time there. I think that when a man hires out to do your job, he ought to be present and on the job and get $1 worth of work for $1 worth of pay. And my record as far as senators is concerned is that this last year, there was only one senator had a worse attendance record than he did. And I think this is something the voters are entitled to know, who's on the job, who's working. And he's tried to make a lot about how he's a big leader and everything, but talked about how he's been in committee meetings and everything. Of course, what he doesn't say is that the rules prohibit committees from meeting while the Senate is in session, just as it does in the House. And so I think being on the job and being willing to tend to responsibilities and being able to serve the people that you agreed to serve, I think is of paramount importance during the course of the campaign.
As a matter of fact, at the last special session of the legislature, I was there 97.3% of the time, which I think ought to get you an A at least as far as attendance is concerned. I've also pointed out to the junior bar today that if you went back and looked at President Nixon's attendance as he was a member of the Senate, or President Kennedy's either, you'd find that they had missed considerable more than I have, and that the price of leadership in the Senate is the fact that you're going to miss some roll call votes in the Senate on unimportant issues.
We feel that there's ample evidence throughout the nation that if liquor by the drink is authorized in Texas, there will be an increased number of outlets, approximately 7 times as many as there are today. And this will radically increase consumption. This will also, very definitely in our opinion, increase accidents on the highway, more homes broken up, and therefore this is a moral and ethical decision. We oppose it on that basis.